You're listening to the Better for America podcast, presented by Amac, the Association of Mature American Citizens.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rebecca Weber, and this is your Amac podcast, Better for America. Today, we're privileged to have with us once again one of the nation's leading journalists, an author who is persistent in digging out the truth and getting it to the American people. But before we make that formal introduction, let me also pause to thank our sponsor for this show. I want to thank Hometown Insurance Agency, a leading independent insurance agency from Main Street business to large municipalities. Hometown tailors their insurance needs to meet yours, whether it be your personal auto or home or business insurance. They will give you peace of mind on day one, and that's what we need, peace of mind and protection, and make sure to keep you content no matter what comes. What's really great about Hometown Insurance Agency is they represent genuine excellence, quality products, and a personal touch, since they are family-owned and operated and have had top ratings for more than 40 years. Their customer representatives come with stringent educational testing, licensing requirements, and have delivered top quality insurance decade after decade. Hometown is proud to be an insurance provider, tried and true. Let me formally introduce our guest today. She is New York Post columnist and a frequent Fox News contributor, has an extraordinary record working across international media, and yet she is a native New Yorker born in Queens who had the remarkable chance to grow up in places like Tokyo and Sydney. She has written on everything from big tech and censorship to Hunter Biden's notorious laptop, a central topic in a book which will be available to you on November 30th. And that book is called Laptop from Hell, which is both compelling and frightening in context of who our president is and how little accountability we are seeing from the laptop to big tech. Please welcome with us today Miranda Devine. And Miranda, what a pleasure to have you with us here again today.
Thanks so much, Rebecca. Great to be with you again and to be with your wonderful audience.
Oh, thank you. AMAC members love you, Miranda. And I do want to dive right into your most recent triumph of research writing, and in many ways a gift to the American people. Your hard-hitting book on the Biden family's unfortunate dirty secrets, as well as how big tech seems to be aiding and abetting much of what is afoot. And so I'd ask for you to give us a top view or overview of your latest book, Laptop from Hell, and what it means for not only AMAC members, but for America. Help us see sort of the magnitude of the untold story and what is really happening behind the curtain, so to speak.
Look, I think probably if we're looking at the bird's eye view, the lasting impression that I have and that shocked me at the time that we at the New York Post began reporting stories from the laptop, which reflect very poorly on Joe Biden, was the fact that big tech immediately closed us down. You know, for news organizations these days, Twitter and Facebook particularly are very important to disseminate your copy, because so many people, 60% of Americans use, or people around the world use social media to access their information. So they come to our website at the New York Post via one of these other alternatives. And to throttle us, as Facebook did immediately, and saying in lieu of fact-checking, was very dishonest, because they still haven't produced any evidence of that they even began a fact-check. I know I've asked the people who I interviewed who were recipients of emails on Hunter Biden's laptop, people who had worked with him, were intimate with him, if they've ever had a call from Facebook to fact-check any of the material that we put online, that we wrote about. No. So Facebook pretended it was doing a fact check, but really it was shutting down our story on behalf of the Democratic Party and its candidate, Joe Biden. Similarly with Twitter, locked the New York Post account. I mean, this is the oldest continually published newspaper in America. It's, I think, the fourth largest newspaper in America. It's a serious media organ, and Twitter just took it on itself to lock our account until a couple of days before the election. 2 weeks we were locked down, and that's has a financial burden as well as just throttling our story, ensuring that it didn't reach the people that it should have, the audience that it should have. And then the second part of this story is that the media colluded with social media as soon as big tech decided that our story was hacked or somehow beyond the pale. That was good enough for the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the great and the good in the media firmament. And then a couple of days later, they had an even better fig leaf to ignore and traduce our story. And that was these 50 intelligence or former intelligence operatives led by John Brennan, the former disgraced CIA chief, also James Clapper, also people like Leon Panetta and Michael Hayden. They should be ashamed of themselves because they wrote a letter claiming that the laptop was Russian disinformation based on their best expert opinion using the great authority of their former officers. They declared, without looking at the laptop, without asking anybody who had the laptop if they could have a look at it and judge honestly for themselves if what they were saying was true, they just came right out of the blocks and just airily pronounced that it was Russian disinformation. And that was enough for the rest of the media to therefore say that this story has been debunked, it is not true, it is malicious Russian disinformation, and everybody who peddles it, by extension, is a traitor. That means that Tony Bobulinski, who is, a former naval man, a former, from a family that's given military service for generations on both sides, who is a patriot, like you could never see, and is apolitical, he somehow gets smeared in this too, because he was confirming so much of our reporting because he was Hunter Biden's former business partner, and he knew as well as anyone did what the Bidens were up to, and he knew that Joe Biden was in this business up to his neck. And this is the problem we have now. The American people were never allowed to do the proper due diligence on one of the candidates for office, and that is Joe Biden, because he has been running this influence peddling scheme all his career from Delaware. And then when he became President Obama's vice president, he exported that same very corrupt business model around the world and really compromised America and America's national security, with some of our greatest foes being particularly China and Russia.
Just unbelievable. And this is the kind of information that Americans really did not know. And I'm imagining all of this is going to be revealed in your book and shared with the American people. I'm very excited to see that book will be out November 30th. We will be sure to put that up on our website to make sure that our members are aware, because that's the kind of information, quite frankly, that people would have perhaps have made a different choice. They may not have voted for Joe Biden had they known some more of the truth. And we're seeing this big tech censorship everywhere we look. I mean, today, for goodness sakes, we see we've got someone talking about Facebook, a whistleblower saying they're not doing the right thing. They're not. Now, I haven't heard all of that, and I'll get to listening to more of that later. But does this really surprise you, Miranda, to hear this happening and unfolding, to see what's happening against these social platforms like Facebook?
Look, you make such a good point, and it was on the tip of my tongue. Why should we be surprised? I mean, we are. Because we've been like frogs in boiling water, I think, with social media, the way it's spread its tentacles into every aspect of our information world. And the way we access information now is controlled by these enormous trillion-dollar companies, which are globally based and have no allegiance to any one country, and certainly not to the United States. And that's really quite terrifying. And, it's a glimpse of a future of artificial intelligence as well. And I'm really very hopeful that it seems like there's a bipartisan feeling, at least among, they might have differing motivations on the Democrat and the Republican side, but they are unanimous in realizing that these companies, whether it be Facebook and Twitter or Google, which manipulate search results so that that I know as a journalist, I'm acutely aware of the fact that I will remember a story that I want to refer to for, say, a column I'm writing, and I search for it, and maybe it was a week old, and it's not there. I can't see it in the first couple of pages of Google search. It's probably there somewhere, and so I now know that I go to an alternative search engine. I use one called DuckDuckGo.
I do
and,
too.
That I mean, it's not as good for some things, but for searching for that kind of information, the stories that might have been buried and you can't find on Google pop up immediately on that search engine. So it's a terrifying thought, because if you can't trust sort of the reflected reality of the news that's put to you, how can you trust anything? And it makes people more prone to being vulnerable, I guess, to conspiracy theories and charlatans posing as truth tellers. It's quite scary. Who do you trust, and who do you trust that has the right information and hasn't themselves been hoodwinked? And yeah.
It's a reason why Dan formed Amac, truthfully. He saw this coming in 2006, 2005, 6. He started to see a real shift, and he noticed that there was so much reporting. The reporting was really so slanted, so far left, and that's going back 15 years. And so this doesn't happen overnight. It's been happening little by little by little. We've got to pay attention, because today, if you're recognizing, for those, our listeners, people who are tuning in, if they recognize that, I recognize the same thing. It's happening. It's happening. We need to recognize it so that we can attack it and do something about it. It's just a tremendous, we're living in a time of really no accountability. People have little or no respect for truth. And it seems that we almost have a rogue one-party sort of government. And so, people, I think, like you and me and millions of other Americans do respect history and respect our Constitution. As an incisive commentator, I want to ask you another question, sort of moving along. You did say that you find it hard to get the truth out. Do you find that people are also trying to cancel you? And then a second question I wanted to ask you is, what do you think are some of the very big issues that are really coming at us or coming around the corner in the months ahead?
Yeah, well, look, I think the big issue that you're alluded to at the beginning is this idea of truth and lack of accountability. And, it used to be that if you told a lie, this was part of the American psyche. If you told a lie, that was a terrible dishonor. But now lying is reflexive and it's built in. For instance, we say that there are pregnant people. This is part of now the AP style book, that boys can be girls and girls can be boys. That's a biological lie, and it's so farcical on its face. You had Joe Biden the other day tell us that his $3.5 trillion so-called, social infrastructure package, which is basically a whole lot of Democrat boondoggles, costs $0. In no universe does $3.5 trillion equal $0. That's dishonest. That's a lie. And it doesn't matter, they have all sorts of sophisticated ways of pretending that that's not a lie, but it's a lie. And there are a lot of lies that are coming out of the White House. And I know that when Donald Trump was in the White House, that was an attack made on him. Ironically enough, by people who basically lie for a living. The Washington Post, for instance, had, 60,000 Pinocchios they awarded Donald Trump. But a lot of those were Donald Trump's sort of manner of speaking that anyone understands who understands anyone from Queens, particularly a property developer. Everything's bigger and better. It's a sort of self-aggrandizing exaggeration, which is not a lie, really. It's not a consequential lie. If you just say your crowd size is bigger than other people say it is, that's exaggerating. And was part of his larger-than-life personality. But of course, every single thing he said was taken literally, willfully, literally, and turned into something malicious and malevolent. And the converse is with Joe Biden, who really has had a lifetime of being untruthful, of telling tall tales which are only fit to kind of make him better than he is, and put him as the hero in the center of some imaginary story. Everything from the corn pop saga that he told us endlessly, to the fact that he was supposedly at the center of civil rights marches, with Martin Luther King, or I think visiting Robben Island, and in South Africa, and with Mandela. And even the other day, he claimed that he'd been to a Jewish synagogue, the Tree of Life synagogue, where that terrible massacre had happened, and he never had. And so I think in his mind, because this happens to people who spend a lifetime as fantasists, really, they lose the ability to discern between truth and fiction. And so he told terrible lies, which I think people woke up to. Even the people who had voted for him and thought still that he was a moderate who was going to unite the country. They realized during the Afghanistan debacle that he was lying, that he told George Stephanopoulos on ABC News 13 days before the August 31, hard deadline for evacuating from Kabul airport. He said, "Oh no, we won't leave anybody behind. We won't leave any Americans behind." Well, of course, that was never going to happen, and it didn't happen. Never took responsibility. The Pentagon again, lying about the drone strike that killed 13 people, including 7 children. The lies in this administration about everything. I mean, the border, you look at the lies about the border, that the border is closed. It's not closed. It's secure. No, it's not secure. We know that. I mean, there are going to be, upwards of 2.5 million people, illegal immigrants arriving in this country, and they get just dispersed across the country into unsuspecting communities. Up to 20% of them at least are carrying COVID and other contagious diseases. We are not allowed to know about those diseases. They're not tested for COVID. They're not forced to have vaccinations like everybody else in the country is. It's appalling. And then to make matters even worse, the president told a lie about those poor border agents on horseback who were doing their job. They'd been allowed for once to go and try and block that hole in the border there in the Rio Grande at Del Rio, because it became a matter of bad optics for the administration that you had 15,000, 18,000 Haitians camped out in unsanitary conditions with not enough food and water and porta potties under that bridge. So the border agents were then allowed to do their job for once. They went and did their job competently using horses on that rocky terrain. And some photographer takes a photo that is just portrays the wrong impression that they were using whips on these Haitian migrants, which they were not. It was, long rains. I'm sure all your listeners know this. And that lie, I mean, I was sitting in Washington, D.C. in the White House press briefing when Alexander Mayorkas and Jen Psaki perpetrated that lie, when reporters in that room asked questions on the premise that that lie was true and that what was the administration going to do about punishing these men on horseback. It was outrageous, and it still is outrageous. They subjected to an investigation. The president said, basically, make them pay. Outrageous, judging them before they've been even had an investigation. So that's, I think, the biggest problem we have at the moment, to try and restore integrity and truth back into public life, whether it be politicians or the media or public servants.
Wow, that was so insightful, really, from so many perspectives. And you're right. Lie after lie after lie. Another one that gets me is going around saying that this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated, really trying to vilify those who maybe for medical reasons, of course, have decided not at this time to yet get vaccinated. Perhaps they have natural immunity. And another lie is, I think, people are just not trusting our president, and certainly the entire administration seems to be following suit. And I often think, who the heck is running this country, boy?
It's interesting, isn't it? I
sure
was
is.
in Washington last week with I was covering the Australian Prime Minister's visit for this AUKUS, nuclear submarine deal, and also the Quad deal, which are very, important deals for the whole world to push back on China and their aggression in the Indo-Pacific. But during that period, I spoke to various members of various delegations from different countries, from the UK, from Australia, and so on. And they said that Joe Biden, in the meetings that they were in with him, which were long meetings over an hour, that he was lucid and coherent, and he was in charge of the agenda. Now, that is a very different story from the story I've been told by some of the same people about his behavior at the G7, where he was seen to be confused. Out of it was another quote, and almost delirious. So I think that, we've talked about Joe Biden having cognitive issues.
Yes.
And that's evident. I mean, you don't really need to be a doctor to see it in the way he relies so heavily on, teleprompters. He has done so since, I saw him in the primaries in Iowa and New Hampshire, and he'd be in a tiny room with a regular stump speech that any other politician could recite in their sleep. And he had to have the teleprompters dragged in. So you can see that he's sometimes not all there, but then there are other times when he is. I mean, he is cognitively sound. So I don't know if the people who are around him can control when that happens, when he's switched on, when he's switched off. I know, he obviously takes a lot of time to rest up after big events, going home to Delaware a lot. It's significant, I think, more so than other politicians. He'll take long weekends, call an early lunch lid on a Friday, come back late on a Monday. So he certainly needs to rest up after these situations. But I don't think we can, the reason I'm saying all this is I don't think that we can take the responsibility away from Joe Biden and blame some, shadowy puppeteers behind the scene. They, of course, are also to blame for these decisions that are made that are so wrong for the country. But he ultimately bears the blame and is, I think, cognitively sound enough to bear the consequences.
Miranda, given the research that you did for the book and what you have learned in reporting on the Biden administration, I want to ask you a tough question, or one that is likely to generate an answer that may be tough to hear. Do you think that the Biden administration's dishonesty, across his entire administration is how I see it, poses a threat to the integrity of our national institutions? Like, do you think the rule of law is at risk? Whether by, non-action against those committing crimes, intentional distraction, where they allow big tech to censor, maybe even an attempt to pack the Supreme Court. Do you think that we're in a unique time, one that presents risks to the future that we have never really historically seen?
I definitely do. I do think, though, that the rot set in a long time ago, and hence the election of Donald Trump in the first place. And Donald Trump, broke a lot of people. And in doing so, he exposed the sort of slow takeover by the left, if you can call it the left, the elites, this sort of unholy alliance between the sort of billionaire class and hardcore socialists. So he exposed a lot of that and, the so-called deep state, whatever you call it. And now Joe Biden's victory in the election was specifically designed, no matter what, to put an end to the changes that Donald Trump the last minute changes to try and rescue the country and the world in a way. To claw back power. And it's very messy because we now see a lot of people have been red pilled. We see what's going on under the, behind the scenes, and we're not like frogs in boiling water, just gradually drifting into socialism. Enough people are aware of what's happening to fight back. But every institution, as you say, I mean, the great lie, I think, of Joe Biden's presidency, which began in his inauguration speech, was that he was, on the one hand, going to unify the country, as he promised to do during his campaign, that he was a moderate, and at the same time that he was going to battle the dark forces of white supremacy and domestic terrorism, which by that he means Trump voters. He means 81 million Americans, and he has declared war on them. And he has sicked the military leadership onto rooting out so-called domestic terrorists, which is basically Trump supporters, basically make America great people, patriots, American patriots. And it's not that Republicans regard Democrats as intrinsically evil, but we have to understand that Democrats regard Republicans as intrinsically evil, at least the ones who support Donald Trump, which is most of them. And so you see the way the DOJ has been weaponized against innocent people. You've had people who were involved in that riot on January 6th and did no violence, maybe just wandered through an open door, maybe didn't even go into the Capitol. And they have been arrested, their lives destroyed, thrown in jail without trial. There are people still in jail. There's a man called Thomas Caldwell, a veteran, an injured veteran, an elderly man. I think he's in his late 60s, early 70s. He was locked up for 49 days. He didn't even go into the Capitol. He did nothing wrong. They accused him of all sorts of nefarious things, of leading an insurrection. He did nothing of the sort. He's now about to lose his family farm to pay for legal fees. He's still embroiled in this terrible fight with the government. It's really very terrifying. And I think just to end this sort of dystopian view of the future is to say that I'm told now that, it's a column I'm working on for the future, that the current stories about people on the Federal Reserve, committing insider trading offences allegedly, I'm told that that's really a ruse to get rid of the more conservative members and to get rid of Jay Powell, for instance, whatever you think of him, the chair, and instead stack the Federal Reserve with progressives who will then allow or use the financial markets and the financial levers at their disposal to push progressive social these social changes they want, and also climate changes that they want. Having given up on democracy, because I think they know that at the midterms, the Democrats are going to be completely trounced, and that a lot of Republican states have now remedied those illiberal changes that were made under cover of COVID last, March, April, May, by clever Democrat lawyers without any pushback from Republicans. Big mistake. I think now they realize that they're going to lose the next 2022, 2024 elections. And they know that Donald Trump did such a good job with the Supreme Court that that's a difficult thing to get control of. So they're now trying to get the financial levers. And once you have that, you have everything.
Wow. Well, as you did in May, you really are making us all think in ways that really mainstream media never does. And I think that many on the left hope Americans never do, right? They don't want us to think along these lines. But the risks and the realities, the facts you present in your latest book and the stakes that you outline in as much of your commentary are the sort of thing that I think if our founding fathers were alive, they would be absolutely shocked to see. We seem to be drifting into a very fast current. We're drifting away from facts. We're drifting away from reality and truth, integrity in government. So I know that we've covered a lot of that already, but I just want to take a moment, if you would, help AMAC members and others get a sense of how persuasive your book, Laptop from Hell, is. We want them to read it. We think that they ought to read it because we ought to know who our president is, and you've done such extensive research. Because for average Americans like me, right, and I do consider myself an average American, the reality is really hard for me to get my mind around. It's hard for me to imagine that we could have a corrupt president. It's dispiriting. It's discouraging, but we can't ignore it. We can't get complacent, and we can't let it be someone else's problem. So, what would you say about how important these latest revelations are in the book, and then what can average Americans like me and our AMAC members do to stop this kind of total disrespect for truth, law, and accountability? And we do a lot here at AMAC, but we're always looking for new ideas and new ways.
Well, thanks for introducing that in that way. I think it's important to understand really the extent of Joe Biden's influence peddling operation. I mean, we all have a picture of it. I certainly did when I did this forensic deep dive into the laptop. But I was so shocked by the things I found that I would periodically just push away from my desk and walk outside and just shake my head and think, am I right? Am I reading this right? I would then check with people who are not named in the book, but who were great assistants in, who were, recipients of emails or involved in documents and so on. And who reassured me and told me more that, yes, this is real, that Hunter Biden and his uncle, Jim Biden, who's Joe's brother, were involved in these geopolitical, gigantic forces beyond their ken. I mean, they were bumbling around among the oligarchs of Russia, the inner sanctum of Vladimir Putin and President Xi. And that was something that they were doing on behalf of Joe Biden, who was the vice president for much of the period of the laptop and who leveraged his power that was deputized to him by President Obama. And President Obama made Joe Biden the representative of the United States in China, in Russia, in Ukraine, in Romania, all these countries. And, countries where we were running around the world preaching about corruption and holding America up as the model for the world. And I think everyone believed that, except that these people knew that Joe Biden was on the take and that his family were there making millions of dollars on behalf of him. So, the book has all the receipts. We know the general picture of what was happening, but the detail of how embedded, especially in the energy field, and how close to his Hunter and Jim's involvement in one of the biggest energy deals in the world between Russia and China. And it was only foiled at the very last minute by the intervention of Trump, by the election of Donald Trump, and then his single-minded focus via his Attorney General, then Jeff Sessions, in cracking down on a lot of this sort of Chinese, money and influence swamping the country and corrupting Americans. But that part of it is very interesting, and the way that the intervention of American law enforcement in the Southern District of New York in arresting various of Hunter and Jim's business partners in New York then led to this domino effect in China where various business partners were swooped up and arrested and disappeared. I mean, it's uncanny how many of Hunter Biden's business partners wound up in jail or otherwise met a sticky end.
Unbelievable. just unbelievable. Well, we're recommending that our members and all those listening definitely get your hands on this book. Laptop from Hell will be available to you November 30th. We want to put a link on our website. We want to make sure that people understand who our president is. There's a lot coming ahead of us, and there's a re-election in the future. So we need to, be armed with the knowledge. Miranda Devine, thank you so much for your insights. They're invaluable. Your experience, it's really one of a kind. And your book will be a great reading. And thank you so much for spending time with us today, really for helping us all really understand what your view is and how we can all do our part to sort of preserve America's proud history, our democracy, our liberty. These are certainly challenging times, and we just want to thank you for taking the time that you gave us here today. We wish you great luck with this book, Laptop from Hell by Miranda Devine. May the truth be well understood by all. And then finally, I just want to thank all of those who are tuning in, especially to our Amac members. Thank you. If you have not downloaded the Amac News app, you can watch, you can listen to this show, you can track breaking news wherever you go. Simply download the Amac News app. And please make sure to hit that subscribe button, follow, like, and share wherever you are. I am Rebecca Weber. This is your podcast, Better for America. Thank you for being here, and God bless you until next time.
Thank you for listening to the Better for America podcast. To learn more about AMAC and all it has to offer, visit us at www.amac.us.